Hello everyone, and welcome to a brand new theory and speculation video. Today, I want to talk about Il Capitano and my speculations on his origins and his future. We know that he'll be making an appearance in Natlan very soon, but I want to talk about other aspects of his character as well. Now, this video does contain spoilers for the quests listed on screen now, so if you haven't done those, you have been warned. With all that said though, let's get right into the video. To start off, let's talk about what we know about Capitano. Unlike the other Harbingers I've talked about so far, Capitano's ranking among the Harbingers is currently unknown. Based on various clues, however, he is very likely the first of the Harbingers. The voice line order of the Harbingers seems to match with their ranking, and this would put Capitano at first. Additionally, many of the mentions about Capitano make reference to his strength, which would further support him being the first of the Harbingers. Now, despite not seeing him in-game just yet, we actually know quite a bit about him. Mika tells us about an encounter that the Knights of Favonius expedition team had with him and the Fatui. At first, both sides were on edge, and it seemed like a fight was about to break out, but that all changed when Capitano and Grandmaster Varka arrived. The two leaders talked and quickly agreed to remain cordial with one another. Capitano remained peaceful in the time he remained in the area, and even helped the knights occasionally. Varka stated that if the circumstances had been different, he would have loved to duel with the Harbinger. Mika also tells us that Capitano had glowing dark blue eyes, which I'll touch on more later in this video. Anyways, with all the information we have about him, his personality seems to be focused on justice. Despite the heightened tension between the Knights and the Fatui due to recent events in Mondstadt, Capitano did not immediately attack the Knights and remained peaceful. Arlecchino also says that he is worthy of respect even without his power. He also seems to believe that the ends justify the means. At Signora's funeral in A Winter Night's Lazo, he says that Signora's death is a great pity, but then immediately focuses back on their plans. At the end of Fontaine Archon quests, we learn from Neuvillette that Capitano is currently in Natlan, and that we'll likely see him there. Before I get into his future though, I want to talk about his potential origins. At the moment, it's unknown who Capitano really is. His face is completely covered by his mask, or so it seems. As I said earlier, Mika said that Capitano had glowing dark blue eyes, which he couldn't have seen if the mask completely covered his face. Instead, I believe Capitano's face is stained with blood. As such, Capitano could very well be the Bloodstained Knight. The Bloodstained Knight was a member of the Knights of Favonius, known at that time as the White Knight. He wielded the Black Sword and possessed the Bloodstained Chivalry artifact set. He lived 500 years ago, during the time when Aaron Dolan was the Grand Master of the Knights. Of course, this was also around the time that the Cataclysm occurred, which I'll talk about soon. While in the Knights, the White Knight would be mentored by the Grand Master's second-in-command, Wolf Pup Rostam. If that name sounds familiar to you, it's because Rostam was also the lover of Rosaline Krushka Lohafalter, or La Senora. Anyways, while training under Rostam, he learned the principles of chivalry, justice, and swordsmanship. Of course, these qualities also seem to fit Capitano quite well. After completing his training, the White Knight would jump at the opportunity to correct any injustice that he witnessed. At one point, he saved the maiden mentioned in the lore of the Maiden Beloved artifact set. The maiden quickly fell in love with him and tried to give him various rewards. However, he insisted that chivalry was its own reward and only ever accepted a white flower from her. Soon, the Cataclysm would occur, bringing hordes of monsters to Teyvat. As he fought against his foes, the White Knight began to lose himself to the feeling of slaughter, convincing himself that it was the satisfaction of justice being served. Another person tried to tell him that slaughter in the name of justice is still slaughter, but he believed that slaughter in the name of justice was justice. As the knight continued on his quest, he became increasingly stained with blood from all the monsters that he fought. His sword, armor, and accessories all became stained black, and he was forced to don an iron mask to hide his face. Interestingly, the iron mask shown in this artifact set bears a striking resemblance to Capitano's mask. The mask he wears as a Harbinger could very well be an upgraded version of the mask he wore as the Bloodstained Knight. Getting back to the story though, the Bloodstained Knight eventually realized that there was no place left for him. Intending to die in battle against the monsters, he marched down into the fallen nation of Khaenri'ah. Instead of dying though, he discovered the ultimate injustice and the curse that had fallen onto the people of Khaenri'ah. As such, he pledged himself to the Abyss. Now, this doesn't mean he joined the Abyss Order. I believe that he may have instead obtained the power of the Abyss in order to seek justice for the people of Khaenri'ah. This abyssal power could be part of why Capitano is so powerful. At some point after this, the Bloodstained Knight would encounter the Viridescent Vener in Sumeru, who I've talked about before. Seeing her as no different from the monsters he fought before, he killed her and continued his journey westward. At the moment, this is where the story of the Bloodstained Knight ends. However, I believe that his journey westward may have eventually led him to Snezhnaya. Here, he could have met with either Piero or the Tsaritsa, or perhaps he could have met Piero outside of Snezhnaya. Either way, he would eventually be welcomed into the Fatui and become the Harbinger Il Capitano. Of course, we know that Capitano will be making his first in-game appearance in Natlan very soon. I've talked about my speculations for his role in Natlan in a previous video, so today I want to discuss his story after Natlan. I believe that Capitano could have a role in Snezhnaya's Archon quests, as well as a return to Mondstadt in the future. Starting with Snezhnaya's Archon quests, I think it would make sense for him to have a role here, as the Fatui are based in Snezhnaya after all. However, I think his role here could be one of the more important ones. There is a popular theory about the Fatui Constellation Wheel telling us the order of Fatui weekly bosses. So far, we have fought the Harbingers in counterclockwise order. We fought Tartaglia in Liyue, Signora in Inazuma, Scaramouche in Sumeru, and Arlecchino in Fontaine. The next two constellations are theorized to belong to Columbina and Capitano, meaning we could fight them in Natlan and Snezhnaya respectively. If we do end up fighting Capitano though, there would need to be a good reason. He doesn't seem like the kind of person to attack someone for no reason, especially if he truly is the Bloodstained Knight. Instead, I believe a fight against him could be for training purposes or a sort of test for the Traveler. He could help the Traveler utilize the powers of all 7 elements, helping to prepare us for Khaenri'ah and Celestia. Instead of being the weekly boss in Snezhnaya's Archon quests, he could be the second weekly boss of the region. This could even be part of a whole story quest focusing on preparing for the future. Speaking of the future, I also think that he could make an appearance in Mondstadt. If he is the Bloodstained Knight, he would have been a member of the Knights of Avonius in the past. His history as a knight could also be part of the reason why he was so peaceful with Varka and the knights on the expedition. In the past, I have talked about returning to Mondstadt with Capitano helping out as well. He could help train the knights for any future conflicts, while also helping to mend relations between the knights and the Fatui. After all, if a big fight with Celestia really is coming in the future, more allies would be very helpful. Moving on to the last section for today's video though, I want to talk about Capitano as a playable character. Just like most of the other Harbingers, I believe that Capitano will be playable one day. However, with him having potential to be involved in Natlan, Snezhnaya, and Mondstadt, it's a bit harder to pin down when he will be released. Given the fact that he is the strongest of the Harbingers, I think that they'll hold off on his release until at least Snezhnaya. Similar to Arlecchino's release in version 4.6, he could release in version 6.6 with a story quest and a weekly boss fight. As for his kit, it's a bit difficult to decide on how he will work as a playable character. If he is the Bloodstained Knight, a sword would make sense, as he would have wielded the Black Sword in the past. He could also dual wield weapons, perhaps a sword and a claymore. One of them would be an equipped weapon, while the other would just be part of his character, similar to Chiori. In combat, his movements would be extremely quick and precise, and he would definitely be a high damage dealer. For balance reasons, he could hold back as a playable character so we don't instantly kill every single enemy. This could also fit with his lore, as he may see it as unjust to use his full power against weaker enemies. For his skill and burst, I think it would be cool if one of these empowered him more, perhaps with elemental infusions on his weapons. As for his elements, I don't think he would use any of the 7 that we currently have. I speculated earlier that he could have obtained power from the Abyss, meaning he could use that instead. He could very well be our first playable character who uses an abyssal element, paving the way for new reactions and new characters as well. As for other characters who would utilize this element, the Abyss Twin, Dainsleif, and Skirk are all potential candidates. We could also get some 4-star characters who use this element, perhaps when we reach Conria. Anyways, that's pretty much it for my thoughts on Capitano and his potential roles in the future. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on ideas that I mentioned in this video, I recommend my videos on the Harbingers of Natlan, Columbina, A Return to Mondstadt, and Viridescent. Also, I will be making videos focusing on the other Harbingers in the future as well. I would love to hear what ideas you all have for Capitano in the comments below as well. Anyways, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Sources and further readings are also in the description if you want to check them out. I hope you all have an amazing day, and I'll see you all in the next video.